Fun fact, I used to live in a small town about 30 minutes northwest of Hutchinson.
Hutchinson, Kansas, a city where most of it is kind of ugly, kind of boring, kind of depressing, economic growth is stagnant, hotel rooms are cheap, the restaurant scene is whack, and yet, Hutch, as the locals call it, is big enough of a city to host the Kansas State Fair. It has a place called the Kansas Cosmosphere and Space Center, and if you really want another unique thing to cling on to, there's the Underground Salt Museum.
It's a cloudy day here in Hutchinson, Kansas, right outside of it at the site of the discovery of salt. Salt mining was basically the identity of Hutchinson early on. It's how the city was able to grow into being the size that it is today.
I might not have been back here in 20 years, but it doesn't seem like much has changed. All in all, Hutchinson is sort of a regional center. Probably a little bit less so today than it was when I lived here in the early 2000s. Hutchinson is home to around 40,000 people, and the next biggest city to the west is Pueblo, Colorado, which is 400 miles away, or about a 6.5-hour drive. Maybe 5 hours if you drink some Mountain Dew and have a full-size pickup. Wichita, however, is 50 miles to the southeast, or an hour's drive. Basically, Hutchinson is far enough away from Wichita to be its own city and regional center, but it's also far enough away to not be a place where young people would look to move to, or employers for that matter, and that's Hutchinson's biggest problem: economic growth.
China.
In fact, if you look up the term stagnant economy in the dictionary, the definition will be Hutchinson, Kansas. The largest population count that the Salt City has seen would be 42,000 back in 2010. Since then, the town has lost 3,000, which is the most that Hutchinson has lost in a 15-year span throughout its entire existence. It's also important to note that from 1980 to 2010, the population only grew by 2,000, which isn't much for a city of 40,000 people. The poverty rate here is a little bit above average at 15.2%, and the median household income is below average, standing at $58,000 per year. Meanwhile, unemployment isn't necessarily the issue in Hutchinson. The unemployment rate here is 4%, which is a little bit below the national average rate. Rather, the problem here is underemployment, which goes hand in hand with employers choosing to not expand their businesses in Hutchinson due to the lack of young professional talent. It's a chain reaction. Young talent moves away once they're old enough, or they never return home after college because they don't see a future here, and in return, employers see the data and don't give places like Hutchinson a single thought when it comes to offering the community high-paying jobs. That's why we're seeing most of the economic growth over the past several decades occur mainly in larger metropolitan areas, as that's where young people want to live. Therefore, that's where companies end up expanding. Pretty simple to understand, really. We've been driving along the far southern part of Main Street in downtown Hutch. While some of the storefronts here are clearly vacant, up ahead there's a little bit more life. But even up there, the overall appearance of the buildings look to be outdated, blighted, dusty, rusty. Basically, the entire downtown district could use a facelift. Back in the day, downtown Hutchinson was a bustling retail corridor. In the 1980s, the Hutchinson Mall was built on the outskirts of town. We can get into that disaster in about, let's say, 5 minutes from now. Downtown, however, took a huge hit with the construction of the big box stores and the mall. So it's safe to say that downtown Hutch has never fully recovered. Most downtowns for cities the size of Hutchinson throughout the country at this point have seen a rejuvenation process begin. Whether it's a little bit of activity or a lot, they've at least seen something. And at first glance here in Hutch, it doesn't look like much has happened. However, after doing some research, it appears that there has been some investment in downtown's redevelopment. We just haven't seen it begin yet. One example would be an old hotel building at the corner of 5th and Main. In October of 2024, an announcement was made by local bankers Meyer and Laura Meyer-Dick.
What up, Meyer and Laura Meyer-Dick?
For a redevelopment project that would create 36 new apartments out of a 5-story blatted hotel. When the hotel was built in 1923, it was the finest hotel in all of Hutchinson. All in all, there used to be 125 rooms. The first floor consisted of a large lobby and a top-tier restaurant. But the last time that this building was used as a hotel was in the 1950s. The name then changed to the Landmark Apartments, but since 2014, the building has been empty. The city even had to close the streets around the building at one point due to bricks falling off and crashing into the street. Plus, when you look at the building today, most of the windows are out. The project should change that though, as it's funded by some state grants and by the owners, with construction scheduled to start sometime in July of 2025, with completion expected to be in the summer of 2026. So that will be good if things can go to plan. There's a few other old buildings throughout downtown that have been purchased by investors with plans on redevelopment as well, but it's going to take a lot more than just a few buildings being purchased to give downtown Hutchinson a new look. Only time will tell if things look different here in the future, but as of 2024, when I came through town, it's safe to say that things looked run down overall. The benefits of downtown Hutchinson seeing the proper amount of investment for a complete facelift would be huge. Not only would it catch the eye of young professionals, but also kids who grew up in Hutchinson. Say if they go off to college, maybe they would see a future back in their hometown, which would give them a reason to come back and start their careers. But to be honest, changing downtown is no easy task, and it's going to take years. And that's probably why things look the same here as they did 20 years ago, because it's not easy to turn things around, especially when there's not that much demand for growth. Another problem is that towns like Hutchinson in the middle of Kansas are very conservative in their approach. No, I'm not talking about political parties, although Hutchinson is that, but it has nothing to do with how the people vote. I'm talking about the lack of aggressiveness among local leaders to make a change. The whole attitude of feeling comfortable with the way that things are is a problem, because if you don't start appealing to younger people, this town is eventually going to be facing a long and steady decline. Heck, we might already be seeing the beginning of that long and steady decline in Hutchinson if nothing gets done, because since 2010, the city has lost 3,000 people, which is the most that Hutchinson has lost throughout a 15-year span in its entire history. Of course, doing so is going to cost some money, but you have to be able to invest in your community. Laura Dick, who bought the old Landmark Hotel building, is a fourth-generation banker in the town, and with her family's roots, she's passionate about making a change. She was quoted in an article on bankbeats.com saying, "We need housing which will help bring young people back, which will in return help economic development and recruiting companies to come and build in Hutchinson," which is exactly what I've been saying. Well, initially when she brought her ideas to city leaders, her ideas were met with laughter. Apparently these members of the Hutchinson Chamber of Commerce have never stepped foot outside of their hometown to see what's been going on in the world. You know, where I'm from, the Rust Belt, Michigan, the region is full of small cities the size of Hutchinson or probably bigger, but they're turning these old buildings into attractive condos in an attempt to draw in young professionals. Take this condo from an old warehouse in the beat-up town of Jackson, Michigan. Look, in my opinion, that just says that there's an even bigger hurdle that needs to be overcome if changes are ever going to be made here. That hurdle being the local culture. I mean, if you're a leader in Hutchinson, Kansas, people like Laura Dick should be your friend. It's people like her that a city can build momentum off of. Laugh at the wrong person and they'll be the ones with the last laugh when they decide to up and leave and go to a different town. Lucky for Hutchinson, though, this person seemingly wants to make a change in her hometown, regardless of how hard it might be. It's my opinion that if changes are not made, we're just going to see a continuance of more vacancies, which leads to more old buildings falling apart, becoming eyesores, becoming potential hazards with chunks of bricks crashing down onto the street, so forth and so forth. Like, if changes aren't made, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the population drops to, let's say, 35,000 10 years from now, and it just keeps going down from there. Hutch certainly has the potential. It just needs to be steered in the right direction before it's too late. And I don't think it's too late yet, but it will be 10 years from now if the momentum hasn't swung by then. Hutchinson has the potential because, for a city in Kansas, Hutchinson is big. Take Johnson County out of the picture because it's so much different from the rest of the state, and Hutchinson is the 7th biggest city in the state. The first is Wichita, the second is Kansas City, Kansas, then it's Topeka, Lawrence, and Manhattan, which are all in the general direction of Kansas City. Then you only have 2 cities in the entire state that are around the 40,000 population mark or larger, those cities being Hutchinson and Salina. So Hutch is a pretty big city for Kansas's standards, and the potential is most certainly there, but smaller cities like Hayes, Dodge City, and Garden City all seem to have seen positive growth trends since 1980, whereas Hutchinson has stayed stagnant with its growth. Point being, don't let the time pass you by, Hutchinson, or you'll be stuck with nothing to do but talk about the good old days when the town was nicer. Who knows, maybe the Cosmosphere wants a new facility in 10 years and they decide that Wichita would be a better location. At that point, it would definitely be too late. Well, if you want to see more of what Hutchinson looks like by the time that this video is over, I drove through the entire city and I'll be uploading a second video that will show you all of the footage that I filmed but didn't use in this video. The video will be uploaded on my second channel called Chris Harden's Video Archives. Don't mind the 4,900 subscriber count, that number is actually 4.9 million, and I'm still talking to YouTube about getting that fixed. Anyway, the link will be down below once it's uploaded, so make sure to check that out. That being said, we're now going to head out to the Hutchinson Mall, where things don't look any better. In fact, things look a lot worse.
Well, here's somewhere that I spent a lot of time about 20 years ago, the Hutchinson Mall, and I'm gonna guess that it looks really dead inside. A lot different than what it looked like 20 years ago. Even though it looked really dead back then, it probably looks even more so dead now. But we're about to go inside and check it out.
Look, it's no secret that fading malls are extremely common in cities the size of Hutchinson across the country. You know, Hutchinson is right in that area where it's big enough of a city to support a mall maybe 40 years ago, but it's not big enough to support one today, so all that's left is a depressing, outdated, and empty fortress of a mall. Looks like the mall recently has tried to rebrand itself as not the Hutchinson Mall, but as Uptown Hutch. Like, renaming the place is going to do anything to help it grow. What a joke. I wonder how many people call this place Uptown Hutch. I bet not that many. Anyway, the Hutchinson Mall first opened in March 1985, nearly exactly 40 years prior to me uploading this video. The anchor stores included a JCPenney, a Sears, a Dillard's, a Walmart, a Service Merchandise, and a Newman's. Upon opening, there were several popular local stores that were originally in downtown that relocated to the newly built Hutchinson Mall. It didn't take long for the first anchor store to fold, that being Newman's. Shortly after that, in 1995, Walmart built a brand new standalone store near the mall property, where it still stands today. From that point, things went downhill fast. Service Merchandise closed in 1997, in which no retail store has replaced it since. So that's 3 decades of retail vacancy inside the mall. And I remember things looking really dead here when I came by as a kid when I was like 10 to 12 years old. Mind you, I moved here from a much more populated metro area, and this was the first time that I ever saw such an empty shopping mall. Quite frankly, the memories have stuck with me ever since. It looks no different today, it's just emptier. Like most shopping malls that are in the current state of decline like the Hutchinson Mall is across the country, weird entities have taken up what was intended to be retail space. Not weird in a bad way, just weird in a way like that's not supposed to be in a shopping mall kind of way. Things like the Esadak Learning Center, whatever the heck that is, or the Christie Health Center, or the DMV of all places. In 2020, upon renaming the place from Hutchinson Mall to Uptown Hutch, a program was initiated where the owners offered free and reduced rent to people who wanted to start a new business and use Uptown Hutch as their new location. You know, not trying to laugh at them for trying, because they should try, but it appears that it didn't do anything for the longevity of this place. Today, notable leases would be a movie theater, Hobby Lobby, Ollie's Bargain Outlet, Hutch Vintage Market, Dunham Sports, TJ Maxx, and Dollar Tree. On the other side of the Ken Kennedy Freeway from the Hutchinson Mall is the failed Target store. That's right, not even a Target could survive the rough economic scene in Hutchinson. While opening up shop in town back in 1994, Target closed in 2017, along with 11 other stores nationwide, during an overall quiet closing of a dozen stores in response to a slight decline in sales that year. That was before the pandemic, so the retail crash in 2020 is not what caused Target to leave Hutchinson. No, this was an evaluation by Target as a company to make a business decision on closing underperforming stores, and they determined that their Hutchinson location was no longer profitable. To add insult to injury, this was right around the same time that JCPenney closed their long-standing store at the Hutchinson Mall. Anyway, workers and shoppers ended up holding a candlelight vigil for the Target closure in Hutchinson. And I love how the Wichita Eagle felt the need to put in the headline that the candles were bought from Walmart. Very important detail there. Well, further on down in the article, I saw something that brought back my hope for humanity in Hutchinson, as I saw that the candlelight vigil for the Target was mostly a joke, so that made me feel a lot better. Anyway, today, the former Target, which is in a good location for a big box store, quite frankly, is being used as a warehouse instead. Lastly, with the decline of the retail corridor that we're in right now, I think it's an opportunity to bring back some shopping to downtown Hutchinson. It would be much more valuable for the community to have a big retail scene in downtown rather than having one all the way out here. And unless Hutchinson can see some population growth again, the city isn't going to be able to support multiple retail corridors. Not only is the population of Hutchinson declining, but the population for Reno County is as well, along with all of the other rural counties to the south, west, and north, places that traditionally have people that would come to Hutchinson for their shopping. Areas east of Hutchinson are gaining population, but that's only because of the proximity to Wichita, so those folks won't be coming to Hutchinson very often when better options are of equal distance away in suburban Wichita. So far in this video, we've looked at the downtown and the condition that it's in, along with the Hutchinson Mall and the condition that it's in. Now we're going to look at the east part of town, where a lot of the industry is, as it kind of goes hand in hand with what I'm about to talk about next, because in order to fully understand why a place is the way that it is, you have to look at the history. The city was first founded in 1871 by a guy named Clinton Hutchinson.
What up, Clinton Hutchinson?
The only reason the town sprung up was so that there could be a town near the Santa Fe Railroad crossing over the Arkansas River. Oops, I'm sorry, I forgot the local dialect, the Arkansas River. That's right, that's how people here like to pronounce it. Well, apparently when Hutchinson first started as a town, early leaders wanted a community that was alcohol-free, as there was a clause that stated if a property owner were to sell or give away liquor before 1875, the property will be reverted to the original owner. This gave the city its first nickname of Temperance City. After several businesses sprung up throughout the 1970s, leaders started to have some pretty big visions for the city. Their visions included Hutchinson to be the next prairie metropolis. As railroads continued to expand throughout Kansas, Hutchinson became a railroad hub. Not quite as large as Wichita, but one of the larger railroad hubs throughout all of Kansas. The infrastructure in place helped develop the next era for the city because shortly after Hutchinson became a well-established, sizable city, deep salt deposits were discovered in 1887. A man named Ben Blanchard,
What up, Ben Blanchard?
was actually drilling for oil when he found salt instead. They say that the Hutchinson salt deposits were formed 300 million years ago and it stretches for 37,000 square miles, making it one of the largest salt deposits in the world. Within 2 years of the discovery of salt deposits in the area, there were a dozen or so salt plants in place in the area of Hutchinson. Plus, the city saw the first salt processing plants west of the Mississippi River. By the 1920s, the state highway system started to take shape, but it wasn't quite yet what it is today. Also by this time, the Kansas State Fair was already an annual tradition. What originally started as the Reno County Fair, or the Hutchinson Fair, around 1875, officially became the first and only Kansas State Fair in 1913. Oddly enough, in the 1880s, before the state fair became about, the Reno County Fair was held in a spot close to the Hutchinson Correctional Facility. Yeah, seems like a good call to move it over to Plum and 17th. There's actually two campuses that make up the Hutchinson Correctional Facility, the one that's here on Halsted and Cary Boulevard, and then the one that's a mile west of here at Severance and Avenue G. This campus is the main campus, and it's probably this one that the fairgrounds used to be located next to. Alright, well anyway, by 1920, Hutchinson was home to 23,000 people, growing from only 9,000 20 years prior. You could say that the 1920s were the glory years for Hutchinson. The population was growing quickly, countless amounts of jobs were to be had in the salt mining industry and nearby factories, the state fair was a big deal every year, there was an electric streetcar system that served the entire city, the railroads allowed it to be an agricultural center, which explains the giant grain elevators that we've been seeing, which, by the way, the elevators combined had a storage capacity of 10 million bushels of grain. While among the most notable businesses in Hutchinson's history would be the Carey Salt Company. In 1923, Carey opened up the largest salt mine in Hutchinson that produced rock salt. The mine is still being used today, but it's ran by the Hutchinson Salt Company instead. Today, the Cargill and Morton Salt Companies also have plants in the city. Which brings me to this, as here on the southeastern outskirts of town, you'll find the Stratica, Kansas Underground Salt Museum. I didn't go when I was here, but I tried to. I was too late in buying tickets. Apparently they were all booked up on the days that I was able to be in town. Regardless, the museum tour takes you 650 feet underground, where the temperature apparently is a consistent 68 degrees no matter what. Plus, the mine that you go into is actually the one that was first dug by the Carey Salt Company back in 1923, so that's pretty neat. Now, if you don't get how cool it would be to go that far underground into these salt mines, then you probably just need to do it in order to understand. I haven't done it and I know how neat it would be, which is why I was disappointed that I couldn't get in there while I was here. You know, footage doesn't do it justice. You need to be there, you need to feel it, you need to sense it. I wanted to do that not only to include it in this video, but also just for personal experience. So anyway, not only do you get to go into an active salt mine and tour it, and tour tunnels that were carved out from mining activity, but because of the stable temperatures and conditions underground, the salt mine has been used as a storage facility for sensitive assets since 1959. Sensitive assets such as original movie films from decades ago, like The Wizard of Oz or the Star Wars movies, which I'm not really a movie person, but you gotta admit, that's pretty neat. Right here in the middle of Kansas, who would have thought? But anyway, the storage of these films accounts for 40% of the Hutchinson Salt Company's business. There's also original movie props stored underneath, in which some of it you can see for yourself if you can get a ticket. Salt mining was such a large part of the identity of the town that Hutchinson's nickname became Salt City. At its peak, there were around 3 million barrels of salt per year that were shipped out of Hutchinson. The plants and mines saw a peak employment of around 600. Today, only about 60 people work in the mine for the Hutchinson Salt Company. It wasn't just grain and salt though, as Hutchinson was surrounded by oil and gas fields as well. The petroleum industry took off here around the 1930s, with the largest oil well being about 9 miles east of town and producing around 3,600 barrels of oil per day. On the east side of Hutchinson, where we are right now, was a gas well that produced 128 million cubic feet per day. The drilling and mining for all of these natural resources, along with the wheat fields, made Hutchinson a strong economic center in the first half of the 20th century. And there's still some factories on the east side of town where we are right now, but the economy stopped growing around the 1960s or so when the population hit 37,000. By 1970, the city lost about 1,000 people before growing to 40,000 in 1980. And I mentioned earlier how the population and economy has remained stagnant over the last 40 years. Another thing to add on the note of oil and gas would be the January 2001 gas explosions. The event caused 2 fatalities, destroyed 2 businesses in downtown, and created a series of geyser-like spouts of water and gas throughout the southern and eastern portions of Hutchinson. 190 people were forced to evacuate, and at the time, people had no idea what was going on. They just saw these random geysers coming out of the ground catching on fire due to the gas pressure that was coming up from underground. This was extremely bizarre because the source of the gas was coming from a storage facility several miles northwest of town at the Yagi storage field. Underground caverns were created to store propane within a layer of salt about 500 to 600 feet below the ground at that storage field. Seemed like it would be pretty safe and secure, right? Well, that was done back in 1980, and it only lasted 2 decades until there was a major accident, because over time a hole formed in one of the pipes that were used to transport the gas in and out of the underground caverns. The gas was highly pressurized and escaped by traveling through miles of rock formations underneath the city of Hutchinson and all of Reno County until it could find escape routes. The gas ended up finding these long abandoned and forgotten about brine wells that were used to mine salt throughout the city from decades ago, and those places are where the explosions occurred. Well, thankfully, one place in town that was safe from the gas explosions would be the Kansas Cosmosphere and Space Center, which continues to be the city's crown jewel. In 1962, a woman named Patty Carey
What up, Patty Carey?
opened a planetarium called Hutchinson's Theater of the Skies in the old Poultry Building on the Kansas State Fairgrounds. In 1966, she opened up the Hutchinson Planetarium on the campus of Hutchinson Community College, and it's been right here ever since. Today, the museum is home to over 13,000 spaceflight artifacts, making it the largest collection of US and Russian spaceflight artifacts combined in the world. The Cosmosphere is the only Smithsonian affiliate in the state of Kansas. Well, people, it is now that time. What did we learn in this video? We learned that while in Hutchinson, you can't always trust that the ground beneath you isn't going to explode from a gas geyser, just like how you can't always trust a guy who calls Travis Kelce Mr. Pfizer.
What up, Aaron Rodgers?
But you can always trust Chris's Livability Score.
Education.
This is Hutchinson High School, home of the Salt Hawks, also home to an 86% graduation rate. Academics rank below average, and it's not considered to be one of the better school systems to send your kids to. You'd be better off heading east into Wichita suburbia, which is a wealthier area, which in return almost always means better schools. Education gets a 7 out of 20.
Crime.
The violent crime rate is 415 per 100,000 residents, while the property crime rate is 2,286 per 100,000 residents. Both of those are slightly above the national average rates, but not by much. Crime gets a 9 out of 20.
Downtown.
I think downtown has potential to be something a lot nicer than it is currently. The infrastructure is there with extremely wide streets, meaning that there's a lot of creativity that can be done there to make things more appealing. There's enough old buildings to give it character, but there needs to be more life. It seems like half of the buildings in downtown Hutchinson are vacant. Downtown gets a 7 out of 20.
Economy.
When a prison is one of your largest employers for a city of 40,000 people, that's a problem. I explained in the beginning parts of this video my concerns with the economy here, and what the future might look like. Economy gets a 5 out of 20.
Environment.
This is a tough one because it seems like an overall clean community. Air quality reports show that Hutchinson has better air quality than 66% of cities in all of Kansas, but the underground gas storage thing worries me because how are you supposed to feel confident knowing that all of that is cleaned up? If you do research on it, you'll find countless articles where companies are trying to avoid the responsibility of stopping the gas leaks, and in return the companies are saying that it's the property owner's responsibilities to plug up the old abandoned brine wells. While that might be true, it's also the company's responsibility to take care of their natural gas and make sure that there are no leaks within their underground storage tanks. Additionally, there's a Superfund site northeast of town called the OB Road Superfund site, which is an old landfill where groundwater and soil was determined to be heavily contaminated, but apparently cleanup there was completed back in 2011. I'll give environment a 13 out of 20.
Recreation.
This is probably the least appealing thing about Hutchinson. Sure, you have the Dillon Nature Center on the northeast part of town, but what's up with this pedestrian bridge over the highway? It seems like it was an expensive project, all for nothing. I'm pointing this out because there's no pedestrian-friendly path to get you to this fancy-looking pedestrian bridge. It's a joke. Since the bridge is built over a Kansas state highway, I'm guessing that it was a state-funded project for the construction of the bridge. Well, it's the city's responsibility to then construct a network of wider and newer pedestrian-friendly paths throughout at least the main thoroughfares of town. Doing that would make a huge difference. There's also a park north of the Dillon Nature Center called Riverbend's Orchard Park. For example, it would be nice if there was a connecting pedestrian path from there to the Dillon Nature Center. Otherwise, there's Sandhill State Park just northeast of town in the same area. Then there's Cary Park just south of downtown. It has the Hutchinson Zoo and a large golf course, but most cities the size of Hutchinson offer at least what this city does, if not more. Plus, recreational assets in this part of the country are far and few in between. Recreation gets a 2 out of 20.
History.
The history of Hutchinson is fascinating for sure, especially the Underground Salt Museum and the fact that original Hollywood films are stored underneath. It gets a 15 out of 20.
Amenities.
Oh boy, amenities are lacking in this city, as I showed you for the entire first half of this video. Not only is downtown lacking, but so is the retail corridor that supposedly killed downtown's vibes in the 80s. I can name you a dozen cities that are the size of Hutchinson around the area that I live that have a wider selection of amenities in terms of shopping, whether it's for your daily groceries or just having a selection of stores to choose from. The Cosmosphere and the Underground Salt Museum are somewhat of a saving grace, but those are more so tourist attractions than they are amenities for the residents as a part of their day-to-day lives. And this is a livability score, not a tourist ability score. Amenities gets a 6 out of 20.
Cost of living.
Easily the best thing about Hutchinson is the cost of living. It's one of the cheapest parts of the country to live in. The upfront price for a home is extremely affordable here, especially for this day and age. $175,000 for a 4-bedroom and 2-bathroom ranch? I don't know about you, but where I live, that price would be twice the amount. Cost of living gets a 20 out of 20. All in all, the Chris Livability Score for Hutchinson, Kansas is 84 out of 180, ranking it towards the bottom middle out of all of the cities that I've done this for so far. Honestly, that livability score seems just about right for this city. Hutchinson isn't the worst city, but it is starting to show signs of a long and slow decline. And I tell you what, the city better change things around quickly if they don't want to become like this Indiana city in the near future. I'll see you in that video. Peace.